They stole my clothes. Cowboy, please help me." The words sliced through the quiet evening like a knife. Jake Carter had been riding for almost 6 hours across the dusty plains of Arizona, his horse slow and tired after a long day. The sun was sinking behind distant red hills, painting the sky in angry orange and deep purple. Jake didn't expect to meet anyone in this lonely valley. Most people avoided this area because of old fights between tribes and settlers. He stopped when he heard the voice again. This time it trembled like a leaf in the wind. "Please, I'm scared." Jake tightened his grip on the reins and slowly turned his horse toward the sound. He followed the edge of a small lake hidden between tall grass and wild bushes. The air smelled of water and desert flowers. Then he saw her. A young Apache woman stood half hidden near the water, her long black hair wet, her eyes wide with fear. She held her arms around herself, trying to cover her body with nothing but tall reeds. When she saw Jake, she did not scream. Instead, her voice cracked with hope. "Cowboy, they took my clothing. I ran here to hide. Please don't hurt me." Jake's heart pounded. He had seen fear in war, but this fear was different, raw and innocent. He quickly looked away to give her respect and removed his brown leather jacket. "I won't hurt you," he said gently, placing the jacket on a rock. "I promise." He turned his back as she slowly stepped forward and took it. A few minutes passed in silence, broken only by the sound of water and distant birds. When he finally turned, she had wrapped the jacket tightly around herself. "Thank you," she whispered. "My name's Jake Carter," he said. "I live about 10 miles east." She hesitated, then softly replied, "I am Naya." Jake could see cuts on her arms and fear painted on her face like shadows at sunset. He knew something terrible had happened. "Who did this to you?" he asked carefully. She swallowed hard. "Men, not of my people. They followed me while I hunted herbs. They laughed, then they took everything. I escaped into the lake." Rage slowly climbed Jake's spine. He clenched his fist but controlled his temper. "Are they still nearby?" Naya looked at the darkening forest and shook her head. "I don't know, but I feel they are like snakes. Quiet, waiting." The wind blew cold across the lake, and Naya shivered. Jake knew night in the desert could kill even strong men. "You can't stay here," he said. "It's not safe. Come with me. My ranch is small, but it's warm." Her eyes searched his face, unsure. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Jake looked at the sky, then back at her. "Because it's the right thing to do." After a long moment, she nodded. And with that single step toward him, Jake felt his life quietly begin to change forever. The moon had begun its slow climb when Jake Carter and Naya left the silent lake behind. Jake walked beside his horse instead of riding, so she wouldn't feel small walking alone in the dark. The desert night was colder than expected, and the wind whispered through thorny bushes like warning voices from another world. Naya kept the leather jacket tight around her shoulders as though it were armor. Neither spoke for a long while. Some pains were too heavy for words. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "You said they followed you while you were gathering herbs. Were they soldiers?" Naya shook her head. "No. Worse than soldiers. Soldiers follow orders. Those men followed only hunger." Jake nodded slowly. He had seen that kind of hunger before, in war, in greedy eyes, in cruel hearts. He didn't press her for more. Some stories rip open wounds better left closed for a while. As they walked, Naya gazed at the endless sky. "My village is gone," she said suddenly. "Burned 2 moons ago." The children screamed, the old ones could not run. "I ran." Jake stopped walking. He felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his boots. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Truly." She looked away. "Sorry does not bring them back. But, it warms the heart for a moment." When they reached the ranch, a small wooden structure with a flickering porch light, Jake opened the door slowly and stepped inside first. He lit a lantern and placed it on a worn table. "You can rest here," he said. "I'll sleep outside if you'd feel safer." Naya hesitated, surprised. Then she shook her head. "No. Storms sleep in the open. You should not." A hint of a smile touched Jake's face. He fixed simple food, bread, beans, and warm tea. When he handed her the cup, her fingers shook. She hadn't realized how tired she was until safety stood in front of her like a wall. She drank quietly, then whispered, "No one has shown me kindness since my mother died." Jake leaned against the doorframe. "This place, it isn't much. But no one will touch you here." A loud owl hooted outside. Naya jumped. "They will find me," she said. "Men who steal are also men who hunt." Jake straightened. Then they'll have to come through me. She studied his face for a long moment. Not the face of a hero, but of a tired man who had chosen to care when it was easier not to. He gave her a blanket and pointed to the bed. Sleep. Tomorrow, we'll figure something out. As Nia lay down, her eyes slipped shut at once, like a wounded bird finally reaching shelter. Jake sat on a chair by the door, his rifle across his knees. Outside, the wind blew harder. Inside, a promise had been made, not in words but in silence. And fate had quietly entered the room. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat in the wooden chair near the door, his rifle resting across his knees, listening to every sound like it might carry death inside it. The old ranch house creaked with each breath of the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, long and lonely, like a warning written across the desert. Inside the small room, Nia slept curled under the blanket like a wounded child. Her face, free from fear for the first time, looked lighter. But Jake knew peace in the desert never lasted long. Near dawn, he heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow. Careful. Not a single rider rushing, but several men moving with patience. Jake stood silently and walked to the small window. Between the cracks of the curtain, he saw 3 shadows dismounting under the pale moonlight. Their horses snorted softly, sensing trouble before humans did. Jake's heart hammered. He gently touched Nia's shoulder. "Nia," he whispered. "Wake up." Her eyes opened instantly. "They're here," she breathed. Jake nodded and handed her his revolver. "I pray you won't need this," he said, "but I'd rather you hold steel than fear." Before she could answer, a heavy knock hit the door. "Cowboy." A rough voice laughed. "We just wanna talk." Jake moved between Nia and the door. "Go back where you came from," he called. "You're not welcome here." The men laughed again. Then the door was kicked open. A tall man with a long beard stepped inside, flashing a cruel grin. "We heard you picked up something that belongs to us," he said, eyes flicking to Nia like she was livestock. Jake raised his rifle. "She isn't yours. Leave." The man stepped closer. "You planning to die for her?" Jake's jaw tightened. "I'm planning to live with my honor." Outside, one of the men tried circling the house. Nia's fingers trembled on the revolver. Then the bearded man moved too fast. Jake fired. Not at him, but into the ceiling. The explosion shook dust from the roof. "Next one won't miss," Jake warned. For the first time, fear flashed through the men's faces. Behind Jake, Nia raised the revolver and pointed it at the door. Her arms shook, but her voice did not. "I am not weak," she said quietly. "I am not alone." The tallest man paused. He studied her eyes and then Jake's. Something changed. "Damn woman's cursed," one of them muttered. They backed toward the door. "This ain't worth blood," the bearded man growled. "But we'll see you again." They disappeared into the night. Silence crashed over the house like thunder. Jake lowered his rifle slowly. Nia dropped to her knees, shaking. Jake knelt and held her shoulders. "It's okay," he murmured. "They're gone." Tears slipped down her face. "I thought I would die again." Jake held her gently. "Not tonight. Not while I breathe." Outside, their horses faded into the distance. But Jake knew something else too. This war was not over. It had only learned where to find them. Morning arrived slowly, like it was afraid to interrupt the night's fear. Pale sunlight crept through the small dusty windows of Jake's ranch house, touching the wooden floor like gentle fingers. The world looked peaceful again, but neither Jake nor Nia trusted it. Jake brewed coffee on the stove. The bitter smell filled the room, warm and real, proof they were still alive. Nia sat quietly at the edge of the bed, staring into the floor as if the night had carved shadows into her thoughts. "They will return," she said softly. Jake handed her a cup. "Maybe. But next time, they won't come unprepared." She looked up. "Nor will we." Jake studied her face, surprised. Gone was the fragile fear from yesterday. In its place lived something sharper, a quiet fire. "Tell me where your people are," he said. "If there's still a tribe, we should get you home." Nia shook her head. "Home is ashes. But there is a small Apache settlement near the Red Cliffs. The elders hide there." Jake nodded slowly. "Then that's where we're going." She hesitated. "They will be hunted too if I come." Jake leaned forward. "You think running will protect them?" "It won't. But standing together might." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, she nodded. Jake spent the morning preparing. He checked the horses, filled water skins, packed food, and cleaned his weapons. Nia watched quietly, absorbing every movement like a lesson written without words. As the sun climbed higher, she asked, "Why do you live alone?" Jake paused while tightening a saddle strap. "Because people leave," he answered. "Some in coffins, some in anger." She considered that. "In my tribe, we do not leave the wounded behind." Jake glanced at her. "Then maybe your people are wiser than mine." Before leaving, Naya stepped outside and faced the desert. She closed her eyes and whispered something in her language. Jake didn't understand the words, but he felt them. The air itself seemed to listen. They mounted their horses in silence. The journey toward the cliffs was slow and dry. Dust rose under hooves like restless spirits. Midday heat crushed the land. Naya swayed with exhaustion. Jake slowed beside her and handed her water. "Rest," he said. She shook her head. "Every step forward is rest compared to the past." He smiled slightly. By sunset, clouds crawled across the sky like bruises. Thunder rolled far away. Jake sensed danger before he saw it. Broken branches. Fresh tracks. "They're close," he said quietly. Naya tightened her grip on the reins. "I know their hunger." They pressed on as night began to fall. With thunder above and enemies unseen behind, they rode into darkness, not knowing if dawn would meet them. But for the first time, they were no longer alone. The storm broke loose just as the trail disappeared into twisted rocks and rising cliffs. Rain fell in violent sheets, soaking Jake's coat and pasting Naya's hair to her face. Thunder cracked open the sky like a giant's whip. The desert, once silent and dry, had turned into a wild and roaring beast. They struggled forward through mud and shadow. Suddenly, a gunshot echoed through the rain. Jake's horse screamed. The animal collapsed onto its knees, throwing Jake to the ground. Pain exploded through his shoulder as his body slammed against stone. "Jake!" Naya cried. Another shot shattered the dark behind them. Jake rolled into cover behind a boulder, dragging his rifle with him. "I'm okay," he lied, but blood soaked into the dirt beneath him. Shapes moved in the storm. 3 men. The same hunters. "They won't stop," Jake growled. "They want you, or me dead." Naya's breath came fast. Her hands trembled, not from rain, from fear wrestling courage inside her chest. Jake tried to stand. His leg buckled. Naya ran to him and tried to lift him. "You must run," he said. She shook her head fiercely. "I ran before. Not again." One of the men laughed from the shadows. "Throw the girl out, cowboy, and we'll let you crawl away," a voice mocked. Jake raised his rifle with shaking arms. "I'll die first," he shouted. The lightning flashed, and revealed Naya standing beside him. Not behind. Beside. She grabbed the fallen revolver from the mud. Her fingers were cold and unsure. She raised it anyway. The thunder paused. So did the world. "Leave us," she called out. Her voice was small, but steady. A hunter stepped forward. "Or what?" he sneered. Naya fired. The bullet struck dirt inches from his feet. The sound cracked louder than the storm. The men froze. No wild screams. No tears. Only stare down. Then another thunderclap tore across the sky, and courage became contagious. The men backed away. "Crazy woman," one hissed. They vanished like rats into rain and darkness. The world collapsed into silence again. Naya dropped to her knees beside Jake. "You're hurt. It's my fault. I should never." Jake grabbed her wrist gently. "Stop," he said. "You saved me." She pressed cloth to his wound, crying openly. "You were not weak tonight," he whispered. "You were fire." As rain softened, Naya realized something. She was not a victim anymore. She was a warrior. And the desert had finally learned her name. The rain had finally stopped, but the night remained heavy, thick with danger and silence. Jake lay against a rock, half conscious, his blood mixing with dirt and water. Naya tore a strip from her dress and pressed it tightly against his wound. Her hands no longer trembled. She had cried enough. Now, she fought. Using all her strength, Naya dragged Jake onto the wounded horse that had survived the attack. The poor animal limped, but it carried them forward into the dark as if it understood their mission. Every step toward the red cliffs was a battle. Hours crawled past. The storm clouds slowly broke apart, revealing cold stars. Naya sang quietly in her language, not for Jake alone, but for courage itself. When dawn finally brushed the horizon, the cliffs appeared like giants carved from blood-red stone. Smoke curled up from hidden fires, Apache fires. They had made it. Weak but alive, Naya called out in her tongue. From behind the rocks, Apache warriors emerged with bows raised, then lowered them when they recognized her. Cries filled the air. Elders rushed forward. Women wrapped blankets around Jake. Children stared with wide eyes. Naya fell to her knees. "I am home," she wept. The elders listened carefully as she told her story. They studied Jake, the wounded outsider who had placed his life at an Apache woman's feet. He was not treated as a stranger. He was treated as family. Days passed. Jake healed slowly beneath Apache care. He learned their songs, their silence, their respect for the land. Naya visited him every morning. They spoke of pain, and of tomorrow. One evening, as the sun painted the cliffs gold, an elder approached Jake. "You came as a ghost," he said, "but you will leave as a brother." He placed a beaded necklace in Jake's hands. It was carved with symbols of protection. Jake swallowed hard. "I don't deserve this," he said. The elder smiled. "No one ever does. That is why it is called honor." When Jake could finally ride again, he said goodbye to Naya near the cliffs. "I brought you home," he said softly. She shook her head. "You walked me home," she corrected. "I carried myself the rest of the way." They shared a quiet smile. Not a promise. Not a kiss. Just understanding deeper than both. As Jake rode away into the wide American West, he touched the necklace around his neck. For once, the desert did not feel empty. It felt alive. And somewhere behind him, an Apache woman stood tall, not as a victim, but as a legend.